You're listening to The New Paris. I'm your host, Lindsay Tremuta. I don't think I ever mentioned it on this show, but for the last several years, I have been actively pursuing projects tied to the past, present, and future of American migration. Why have we always left, and what has happened to society, opportunity, affordability, and safety that make people inclined to investigate living elsewhere in 2026? As a writer, my first instinct was, of course, to pitch this as a book. That sadly didn't happen when I was trying to go that route in 2024, before the presidential election, but I think it was a blessing. Books, as you know, take a long time to produce and release into the world. 2 years, in fact. A lot can change in 2 years in today's world. So then I narrowed my focus to Americans moving to France, Paris predominantly, with a monthly questionnaire on my newsletter, The New Paris Dispatch. And then I had an unexpected opportunity to write the piece that was constantly on my mind for a fantastic indie publication out of the American South called The Bitter Southerner. That reported essay, which I've linked to in the show description, explores the whys and also the hows, the cottage industry that has developed of assisting and guiding Americans with the work of leaving. There's a lot more to it than that, and I hope you'll take a moment to read the piece. But one of the related subjects that made sense to explore here is building friendships and making connections once you have decided to leave. This doesn't only apply to leaving and moving to France, although that will obviously be our frame of reference today. My guest to do so is a longtime friend and Paris resident, Jane Bertch, who explored the complexity of making meaningful friendships here in a podcast episode of her own last month on her show, GenerateHER. Some of it, she says, has to do with the culture, but some of it has to do with expectations and etiquette. Given the number of people we hear about each week who have recently settled in Paris, plan to or continue to spend part of their time here, it felt like an appropriate moment to discuss this together. And before we dive in, a quick reminder to subscribe and rate the show if you're enjoying it. It helps other listeners find their way here. Hi, Jane.
Hi.
I'm so happy you're back.
I'm so happy to be back.
You know, the last time you were on this show, I know you've been on a few times, but the last time was because we were talking about your book and the lessons you learned when writing that book. And that book came out in 2024, is that correct?
Oh, my heavens. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Has it really been 2 years? It's been more than 2 years.
Yeah, it's been a minute. But
Oof.
In the meantime, you've launched something quite big, which is two things, actually. A podcast called GenerateHER, Prompts from Paris, right?
Yeah, my newsletter.
Your newsletter. And these retreats in Paris that are geared toward women who are either revisiting their careers or thinking about something entrepreneurial. And, you know, as someone who has been in business a very long time, you have a lot of expertise to share on the matter, and perhaps how they can adapt more Parisian or French style approaches to professional and personal life when they go back home. But the reason I wanted to have you back now is twofold. I heard the episode you recorded very recently on why you're struggling or why people struggle to make friends.
Yes.
In France. I mean, I think Paris is particularly challenging, and I think that's where we're going to focus. I've not lived in another part of France. I know you have obviously spent time like I have outside of Paris, but
absolutely,
you know, our networks are really based here. And it kind of dovetails nicely with the essay I wrote. And obviously I'm not researching or speaking solely about Americans who have chosen Paris or chosen France, but it raises a question about once you've made the decision to leave for whatever reason,
right,
you're going to need a support system on the ground.
Absolutely.
And how do you go about building that in ways that are respectful to people's lives, careers, and existing friend structures? And I think you handled it really beautifully. You talk about the way the French historically approach friendships, certain social etiquette guidelines that everyone should keep in mind.
I always say, according to Jane. I mean, maybe other people have had different experiences. This has been my 20 years of it. And I think there's some validity to it. But
well, I think it's also worth mentioning that you and I are very old friends.
Yes, we are.
And that's also why you're kind of one of the perfect people to come on to talk about this, because you and I met online, but knowing that at some point our paths would cross, and that did happen.
Yes, it did.
But we met on Twitter.
Yes, we did.
And I'm not going to rehash that because I think we did that in the previous episode. But just to say that, that was a different time. That would have been 2009.
My gosh, yes, it was 2009.
So
Heavens.
that's not the way people are connecting now. They're connecting on Instagram. They're connecting, hopefully still in person, which is how I met a lot of people.
Right.
But I want to get your take on what you see as sort of the risk with all these people moving to wherever, to be honest. But let's say Paris as a focus, a city that has always been international. So it's not just that there are a lot of Americans, there are foreigners everywhere.
Yeah, this is not a new story.
No. What do you see as the potential risk for those new arrivals, given what you shared on this episode about meeting people? And I assume you did this because it is a persistent issue, challenge, pain point.
Yes, it really is. And I think I opened that podcast saying this is the podcast I never thought I would do. It was a little different from what I'd like to talk about, but this subject keeps coming up over and over. And I know there's a few elements there. Loneliness is such an issue. That is our big epidemic. So we know the importance of having social networks. And I know the difficulty of making friends when you're more advanced in life. Friendship is very contextual. And when you don't have all of the things you had in university or college or your first job, once you start to identify yourself and your life, it's very difficult to then integrate others into it. So I know those are all subjects. And then you have the Paris factor, which culturally, and I'm very careful not to just say those people that are friends who are natives, because I think anybody that's lived here long term, including you, will probably adapt what some of the norms have been. And I guess the only way I can explain it from people looking on the outside, I was trying to get my head around what's a wonderful way to look at this. If you look at, we have three circles of existence. I'm dumbing this down for myself so I can explain it. You have your family, you have your work, and you have your friends. And those are really the three circles that we tend to operate most of our time in. And in North America, let me say the US, I don't want to lump Canada in it because I've never lived there. Those circles overlap really easily. You'll see.
So work friends
will become home friends. The work barbecue, you'll have your family in your office. You'll have pictures of your family. Those circles overlap a lot. And I'm not purporting to be Amy Cuddy, who writes beautifully on understanding different cultures, but in France, I've always seen that they don't. What happens professionally is its own unique ecosystem. You will very rarely go into a French office in professional services and see people's families in photos on the desks.
Oh yeah, no.
You just won't. You won't. Again, these are professional services. I know things are changing, as do all cultures, but you won't necessarily bring anything of your family, including what you did for the weekend, into your professional setting. So those circles don't combine easily. And why they're that way, I don't know, but I think education has a lot to do with it. Culture certainly is why it is, but if you don't understand those dimensions, it becomes very hard to then break in from the outside. So already we're on different playing fields.
So then let's go back to when you moved to Paris, you were still in banking.
Mm-hmm.
How did you meet your first friends, wherever they were from, whether they were, locals or they were foreigners similarly having an experience abroad?
So my first foray into making friends was signing up for any sort of expat group I could get my hands on.
You did go straight to, a group with individuals in a similar circumstance.
Absolutely. I saw quite quickly that I was not going to make friends in the office there. There was no interest whatsoever. And so, in that situation, you try to find you try to find people who are in the same situation. And so I fell across, there's so many, or there were, I think one of them was called Internationals. There were a number of American women groups that I tried to get involved in. So that was my first attempt, was let me find people in a similar situation.
And then when did you manage to establish relationships with perhaps some native French locals?
First and foremost, and I'm going to try to think of some salient examples. One of my good friends now, I actually did work with at the bank.
Huh.
We had that common pain point,
Yeah.
let's say, that years later has kept us in touch, and our friendship over those years has developed. Another one I'm thinking of that's very dear to me, it was because of an introduction. But in each case, there was some sort of anchor that connected us. Someone or something contextually put us together. It was not out of the blue. And it certainly took a lot of time for us to develop that trust and confidence.
It's so interesting because, one of the, you might argue, one of the easier paths is through children, right? If you're moving over here and you already have kids, or you end up having kids here, eventually they have to go to daycare, they go to crèche, they go to school. And it's not a given, but that is one way you end up connecting with French and other foreign nationals who are in the same experience.
Absolutely.
And I know that's how some of my friends have made connections, some tighter and, really more profound than others, but that's one route. But for many of us who don't have kids, even having a spouse who's French is not a given. So this doesn't particularly relate to the idea of people moving over here and needing to start over. But I effectively did that, 20 years ago.
Right.
And had my husband as one anchor. However, I was not suddenly buddy-buddy with his friends.
No. You know what? This is one thing I think is so important. Proximity does not mean closeness here.
Definitely not. Definitely not. No, and also it's a big ask to another group of people who have very different interests to suddenly embrace this new person who, frankly, they don't know is going to be around forever.
Well, and there's that.
Right.
Yes.
And that's something that plays into not just these sorts of dynamics, but when you're transient, and there are plenty of people who come and go from Paris as well, and they're here 3 months, they're here 6 months. And if that lasts 25, 30 years, that back and forth, and people can have faith that you will keep returning, and so they can nurture and invest time in a relationship with you. If you're here, 3 months a year, it's hard for people to say, I'm going to keep devoting time when there's a lot that might prevent you from coming back.
Absolutely.
Or, just the unknowns that when you do come back, that you're also available. And so it's about how they're investing time in friendships that they want to be very close.
That is such a good point, Lindsay, because you're right. There's so many different approaches of how people, time is certainly a factor. It's like, and I sit with myself and I think, before you agree to marry somebody, before the proposal, right, you've spent years getting to know each other, and you identify behaviors that you love and you identify ones that you don't love, but you love them enough to stay with them long term. And some of those long relationships never result in a marriage. And that's very much like friendship, I've come to understand. But yet we get so disappointed because of the investment that we've put in friends when we realize, this actually isn't my person.
Right. And that happens. And I think one thing you and I have talked about many times is how some of us were friends with people in the beginning of our time in Paris because we had a shared experience, because we came from similar backgrounds, but ultimately would never have been friends had we stayed in America. And I think we do that because we are longing for that attention, that connection. And there's also a degree to which that might happen anyway. Your friends, you're the one who told me this years and years and years ago. I know you didn't create the expression, but I heard it first from you about having friends for a season, a reason,
a season, or a lifetime.
Or a lifetime.
Yeah.
And it can be really painful to realize that that's someone you have spent a little bit of time with might fall into one of those buckets. But I do think that some people arrive in this new place and have expectations that might be unrealistic. Mine were, well, I was young, it was a new culture, and social media wasn't what it was, or wasn't what it is today. And so I thought, well, my husband's friends were going to be a stepping stone, Yeah. Ultimately, they were barely even that. So
Yeah.
I had to, create my own network. I had to become very quickly far more social than I ever used to be, which might surprise some of my friends because they know me as someone who's like fairly extroverted, but I was not like that. What do you think it is about? Is it sort of a desperation when you land in a new place where you just, the first thing you want to do is reach out to every single person you think you have something in common with? But if you take social media out of that equation, like when we first moved here, you wouldn't have that as an option to try to quickly connect with people, right? So what is going on right now that makes all of this so fraught?
What's going on that makes it all so fraught? You're quite right. I hadn't thought about social media, but yes, now we have this tool that leads us to believe we know Lindsay.
And Jane.
And Jane. And we have really a sense of who they are. And we've exchanged comments there. And now I have a friend in Paris. And I do, I'm an only child, so I have all sorts of issues about friends are such a deep, rich thing to me. You know this.
I do.
That I can get really sensitive about it. And so there's that element that some of us carry. There's also the element of, when you're foreign in another city, your friends become that de facto family.
Absolutely.
So I absolutely you get here and you want to create a community, but you have to understand, it's like you can't sit down to play chess when actually it's a checkerboard. And you need to understand how things operate differently. But I think social media has led people to believe that they have access to everyone. And that can be very disappointing.
And also, am I correct that there may be certain ways of doing things in the U.S. that we're no longer used to?
Yes.
It's sort of my common gripe is how like the youth, which is such a general way for me to refer to like Gen Z and even younger who have requests or, reach out because they want to learn from you, but the way they go about it is very eyebrow raising. I don't even think that's the right way of saying it, but I don't think it's the most conducive approach to convincing someone to devote their time to guiding them. Part of what we learned as kids is how you approach people, how you write messages, how you write emails or letters, or how you pick up the phone and call someone, and how you frame a request when you're coming from a position of inexpertise, needing to learn, and needing help.
Yes.
And I find that the online culture has certainly blurred a lot of that. And so sometimes I feel very put off by the ways in which I'm solicited. And that's not even just for friendship. So, this is sort of a wider reaching issue. But is there something you can think of that you have noticed is commonplace in the U.S. in terms of social dynamics that you think we're just sort of not used to anymore here or at all?
I think so. Again, we're both a product of our experiences, and a lot of our experience has been here. And I grew up in a France where to get to know somebody, you had to be introduced to them by somebody who knew them.
So you wouldn't meet someone, at a cafe and strike up a conversation?
No, that doesn't happen here. They'll think you're crazy. People, okay, maybe it'll be very frivolous, but to sit in Chicago, I can sit and chat with the person at the bar next to me. That has not happened comfortably and regularly in Paris that I've seen.
Right.
to me. I've never met a stranger that way. I have, however, met strangers because Lindsay said, "Oh, Jane, you should know Beth," and put us together. And that is how I found culturally relationships, because this is such a relationship-based business. And that's why, or based culture, that's why cold calling does not work here.
Oh, but they try.
They try, but cold
the telemarketers
calling,
certainly try.
yeah, there's a telemarketer in every country. Very true. But in the US, you can cold call friends. You can cold call people who you want to be friends, and hey, let's have a coffee. Doing that here.
Wait, but cold call, you still have to have had some sort of connection to them, right? Like you
Well,
meet
I
at a
have
party.
seen complete strangers. I'm talking about Americans. Complete strangers. They'll see you on LinkedIn. I like your profile. Hey, let's grab a coffee. I don't think that happens as easily here for natives or people that have lived here longer. I think, again, culturally, they want to have a reference point. They want to know who you are. Why are you getting in touch with them? I don't want to say there's suspicion, but there's a bit of apprehension to the stranger when Americans welcome the stranger.
So that's really interesting. The only person that I've ever a friend I picked up at a bar, let's say, is Italian, actually.
Okay.
And she's become a good friend. And I was sort of coaxed by a few other friends I was with at the time to speak to her because I heard her speaking Italian. I was learning Italian. And now our friendship is entirely in English because I don't want to bother her with my broken Italian. And English is the common language. She speaks French, but English is, she works in English. She's comfortable in English. And that is one of the very few times that I sort of, in recent years, picked and I joke, picked someone up as a new friend. Otherwise, I can count on, one hand, I suppose, the friends that I met, the very, very close friends I met through frequenting the same places in Paris. And that's another way. Right. You become a regular somewhere, you get to know the regulars, but it does take time and
again, we're back
investment.
to the time. And you have a relationship with that place. And so that's the vehicle that connects you to.
So then there's an issue here also with etiquette in making introductions, because what I've seen, and this seems to be true for both, people living in Paris and people living in most of the United States, there's a real sensitive reaction when you introduce someone to someone else and then you get sort of ejected from that dynamic. Do you think there is an appropriate way, let's say in Paris, to do something like that? You introduce someone, you're happy that they become connected, but the idea is not that you are dropped and forgotten.
Yes.
Is there a way to do that? I mean, and is to tie it to particularly the scenario of people moving here where that might happen more frequently, how do you pick up on the signs that might happen and protect yourself? Because I know that's happened to me several times. I devote time. I try to be gracious with connections and then find myself a bit walked on.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I don't know that there's a rule book, but if I go back to, relationships here are the key to everything. They're the key to doing business. They're a key to the social circles. They are a key to enjoying life here. And so people are very respectful and careful with them. So yes, that doesn't mean just because I've introduced Lindsay to Joan that I need to be in the picture forever. But I think there's a quiet moving on rather than Joan or Lindsay looking like the friendship grifter that's just trying to use me to get introductions. And the moment people sense that, one, it's also sending a very quick signal that you're actually not interested in being my friend. You're not interested in developing a relationship with me. You want to date around. So again, we're back to the
picking up and dating, the dating analogy in friendship.
Yeah. They're not far from each other.
And so this also relates to time, protection of one's friends in a positive way, that the French are going to nurture their relationships and that's not something that they're going to compromise on. So for people who are arriving, how do you create that trust that you're really interested in building friendships and that you understand that you're entering into a city where people have existing close friendships, they have lives, and you're
Yeah.
sort of the new kid on the block. How do you address that? How would you approach that if you were, let's say, moving to back to London? How would you handle that?
How would I handle that? You know, sometimes you know better what not to do than what to do. So
Okay, so what wouldn't you
I'll
do?
tell you the
Yeah,
things I
that's
would
easier.
not
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
When I dedicate time to seeing somebody, I commit to it. And I don't try to fill my agenda with coffee dates all day long with different people.
Mm.
Because again, the friends that I have now, if they sense that, oh, I'm just trying to have a coffee date, then that's all they're going to have too. So it's committing to time to have the depth of a friendship, which often means if I'm arranging to meet coffee with somebody, I try not to schedule anything on the back end. So if every coffee date you're like, oh, gotta go because I have a rendezvous now with Lindsay, or oh, gotta go, you know, it doesn't look as though you're wanting to spend friendship time. So it sends very confusing signals to people. So I would not heavily load my calendar. I would not come to you to say, hey, can you introduce me to X? Can you introduce me to Z? Or I can't wait for, you know, us all to get together. That's very presumptuous. And what does that tell you? That
So you mean
actually,
it has to happen a bit organically,
I think it
where
should
you
happen
say,
organically.
oh, hey, you're moving. You meet this person. You get a sense of who they are, what they're about. And you say, oh, I have someone you might get on with.
Yes, yes. But, you know, keep in mind, and I'm sure you've experienced this, I have friends that are local that they're just even careful about who's at their dinner party.
Mm.
So beyond just their friendship network, they want to make sure that you are the type of friend, especially if they're local and they've lived here, because guess what? The friends they've had since they were 5.
In some cases, yeah. I mean, I know many exceptions to that, but the caveat is that they are people who probably have lived
Yes,
abroad.
internationally, yeah.
Yeah. The French people I know that are much more agile within social networks have had an experience in so many different cultures. And so they're maybe less tied to their, historic friends from childhood.
Yeah, yeah. I'd also say I find the French, and this is where I think it's appropriate to use this, very discreet. They're very discreet about their relationships. And if you're seen to name drop and try to show off, the French hate bling. It looks vulgar. It looks very performative. So again, they're questioning what type of friend are you and what type of friend are you trying to be?
I think also there are so many fascinating people coming through Paris all the time. And
Always.
I talk about this issue of building friendships while also knowing that I've had the opportunity to connect with people who I may not actually see all that often.
Right.
But who have enriched my world in some way. And so how do you differentiate you as someone who's lived here a long time between the people you want to dedicate some time to when they come through, and maybe they don't even live here and have an intention to live here, and those you feel don't add what you wish they could to your life?
That's such a great question, because we've got people in all of those categories, and I know you do too.
And I feel badly because I can't, I enjoy these meetings so much, and I've learned so much from some of the people who don't live here. So I feel a sense of guilt as well, because on one hand, I have loved getting to meet people who are just passing through, and I find that those connections are so important as well to my maintaining a connection with Americans, if they're American, to the enrichment of my mind, because so many brilliant people come through this town.
Absolutely.
I also feel, on the other hand, stretched thin.
Oh, yeah.
And so a bunch of us keep going back to this idea of we want to be able to see our close people. So how do we navigate that? And I don't know that we have an answer. I don't expect you to have an answer. I just think I try to do right by people And sometimes it's hard
Yeah.
to do it all.
It absolutely is. And, the reality is we're not living in Warsaw, Poland. So the chances are we have a lot of people traveling through this city.
No offense to Warsaw.
No offense to Warsaw, which is
You're
a beautiful city.
You're
I've
just
been
not
there.
the busiest and most touristed destination in the world.
Right. So, we already have lots of people visiting. In your case, and moderately in my case, we are people that people may know us or recognize us because of social media. So that adds another layer of people who would love to spend time. I have a business, and I'm so grateful that people come through there and want to meet me. And that's such a privilege that I have that. But that also means my days only have 24 hours a day, and I only have 7 of them.
Mine has 36.
Mine has 48.
I'm just kidding.
Actually, no, I'm teasing. But that means that I have to make choices all day long where I spend my time, because it's so limited. And when I know that you and I don't even get to spend enough time together, right?
I know. Is this why I'm doing this episode, maybe?
In my opinion. So when I dedicate time to somebody who I'm just getting to know, we're in the friendship dating phase, and I see that either what they need is a babysitter for the afternoon because they don't have a Paris plan, or they want to use me to get access to all of my network, that's really frustrating.
Yeah.
Or they think I'm just a vessel to pick information from.
Oh, yeah.
So all of those 3 things are bothersome. And I don't know that I have an answer to it, but I just hope that people, think about, we're all banks. You cannot continue to take withdrawals from Lindsay without pouring back into her. And
is that an analogy you would have had you not worked in a bank?
I don't know. Did I just make that up?
I love it, though. It works. So perhaps we should end with a few recommendations, right? Because if we want to encourage people to find their people when they move here, and if you have children, that can be through children's activities and activities with school. It could be through cultural venues in this city. I know some people who become members of the Louvre or the Friends of the Louvre, or
absolutely
related to the arts, and so then they meet people who have the same interest in the arts. Are there other avenues that you would recommend?
Those are 2 great ones. I think one, have a central common point with the people that are living here. We've got a lot of coffee cafes that are coffee forward. We're very international. Spend time at those. I hate to say do your time, but I also want to encourage people that it just takes time to get to know others. And if you look very prescriptive around why you're trying to meet somebody, they sense that quite quickly. And again, they've chosen to spend that hour of time with you, not somebody that's closer to them, not working on something they needed to work on, not making the phone calls they needed to make. And you only get that one time to try to see, what, we've got a connection. I really like you. Let's continue onwards. Because we all want those relationships, don't we?
Absolutely. And Paris is full of fascinating, creative, funny individuals. And I think I mentioned this in the beginning, that I was not quite the social person I am now when I arrived. And I think that sometimes being thrown into the deep end of this, new city, new country, new life, hopefully can help something else in you emerge that may have been dormant partially out of necessity. And if it doesn't, it may just be a little bit more, work, and it takes the time. But I do know that those of us who have put in that time feel completely rewarded.
Absolutely.
The one last thing I'll say, and I would love to know what you think, is, do they have to be French? Do your friends have to be, I would say that, try to get to know people from various backgrounds. I mean, I've got friends from all over the world, and I appreciate that. I think it's so important. Is the goal, or should the goal be, I only want French-speaking friends and that's it because I'm in France?
Right. Okay. So that certainly would not be my category. I've got friends from all over. And yes, there is something so wonderful about having somebody that is local to the city or country take you under their wing. You'll get exposed to things that like nothing else. But I've still got a very international mixed bag of friends. And I would say it's wonderful when that happens, but people are not to be collected like trophies. So let that happen organically. You don't need to rack up your like trophies of my French friend. I have a French friend. I hear that all the time and it drives me. It's like
my one French friend.
My French friend said, and I'm like, well, I don't say my American friend Lindsay said, or my actual dual citizenship American and French friend Lindsay. It's just
please don't say that. That would be really a tongue twister,
no,
and everyone would eye roll.
But it's the point. You hear that and you think, okay, it's calm down. It's okay.
And also, no one wants to be the token anything.
No one wants to be the token. Okay. So if I can say one more thing, because you said I said what you should not do. Please don't send an email asking if you can pick anybody's brains. Don't do it.
I know that expression. And that's true in professional settings as well. Like this is sort of an overarching phrase that there's a part of me that dies maybe a little.
I'm like, honey, I don't have much left for me today. I can't spoon it out to you.
But it's also, again, it goes back to the approach, the way you make requests, right? Picking someone's brain assumes, aside from the fact that it's a gross image, assumes that there is sort of like an extraction happening. This is not a dialogue. This is not a conversation. I'm just going to pull from your brain. And we just don't want that to happen.
No.
We want everyone to feel respected.
Yeah.
Jane, I really like being your friend.
I love being your friend.
And I wish some people could have been a fly on the wall the day we met and realized via our handles from Twitter that we were in the same room and that's what La Cuisine Paris looks like. And that's what, at the time I was lost in Cheeseland, you must have thought that's what I look like.
Oh my gosh.
We didn't really
remember
know.
that day. So that whole thing was traumatizing.
Don't leave people thinking that friendship building needs to be traumatizing.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's so rewarding, especially when you live overseas. Your friends become your family.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you are my family.
You're my family.
And I will be linking to the episode that inspired this conversation. You're far more succinct. I think I've been a little bit meandering, but
no.
I'm grateful for your take. You know, have come through the corporate world before, starting your business. And I think that is a common path to moving into a new country. And I think it's important to have those lessons. So thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you.
And if people do want to spend time with you and learn from you, your retreats are another way to do that.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
So when is the next one?
So I have 2 that I'm working towards, September and November. I should start talking about them soonish.
Well, you heard it here first.
Yes,
subscribe to GenerateHER and follow Jane Bertch online for all those updates.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you, my friend. That's the show for today. If you're listening on Spotify, be sure to check out the poll related to this episode by scrolling down in your app. There are more exciting conversations to come this season, so I hope you'll subscribe or share the show with a friend if you've been enjoying what you've heard so far. As always, you can find more from me at lindsaytremuta.com and at the New Paris Dispatch on Substack. À très bientôt.